Hi everybody, Captain Al speaking with your training tips designed to help make you a better, more knowledgeable flight simmer, pilot, or aviation enthusiast. Let's lower the HUD and see what is on the horizon for today. Our briefing today will cover basic flying skills in the Boeing 747-400. These basic flying skills are for not only for pilots but for flight simmers as well. They are designed to improve your understanding and your application of pitch and power combination skills. They can improve your instrument scan, and they also help develop your control feel. I've designed this to be interactive so you can fire up your 747, whether it's a PMDG or some other developer, and fly these exercises with me. It doesn't have to be a 747. You can use any aircraft to do this to help develop that skill. These exercises will help you when you manually fly a visual approach or an ILS approach, any non-precision approaches where you take over from the autopilot and fly manually. VFR traffic patterns, when you manually fly stalls or steep turns, and when you manually do upsets or unusual attitudes. All these exercises will help in controlling the aircraft during those particular maneuvers. We're going to start out on the runway of your choice. You can pick any airport, any runway, doesn't matter. The engines are going to be running, and the flight directors will be off. The auto throttle is not going to be used, so we're going to be using raw data only on the PFD. You can put yourself at a short or mid-range weight in the 400, which we're going to be using today. I'll be at about 630,000 pounds. If we're using the Dash 8, 720,000 pounds. And if you're in another aircraft, just pick not a heavyweight, not a lightweight, but kind of a mid-range weight. What we'll do is advance the power to takeoff thrust in the 747 PMDG. I'm going to advance the thrust to about 90% N1. That's not full max rated thrust, but enough thrust to give us a nice rate of climb after we're airborne. We're going to rotate to a target pitch attitude of 15 degrees with a positive rate. We will retract the landing gear. And then we're going to adjust our pitch to maintain a speed of between V2 plus 10 and V2 plus 25. That's the normal speeds we're looking for during the climb. At 1,000 feet, we'll lower the pitch from around 15 degrees to 10 degrees for acceleration to retract flaps. We'll then retract the flaps on schedule. Once the flaps are up, we'll adjust our pitch to maintain 250 knots and continue climbing out with whatever vertical rate that gives us. We're going to initially climb to 8,000 feet, and anytime you're established in the climb, you can start to turn to any cardinal heading. It can be north, south, east, or west. So a 360 or a 180 or 090 or a 270 heading. Your choice, whatever's shortest to turn to or whatever you want to turn to. Leaving 5,000 feet, we're going to reduce the pitch to climb at 1,000 feet a minute, and we'll then adjust our power to maintain 250 knots. So pitch to maintain 1,000 feet a minute, power to maintain 250 knots as we exit through 5,000 feet on our way to 8,000 feet. When we get to 8,000 feet, we're going to reduce our pitch to maintain 8,000 feet. We'll reduce the power to maintain 250 knots, and we'll be on a cardinal heading of north, south, east, or west. Then we're going to start the S-turn exercises. We're going to go from 8,000 to 12,000, and we're going to do that at 1,000 feet a minute. And so we'll increase the pitch to maintain, give us a rate of 1,000 feet a minute. And then as the speed starts to drop off, we'll add power as necessary to maintain 250 knots. and we'll be climbing from 8,000 to 12,000 at 1,000 feet a minute, 250 knots. Once we're established in the climb, you can start a left turn 180 degrees from your cardinal heading, so you can go from south to north or north to south or east to west or west to east, depending on where you are. You can make a left or right turn. I'll make a left turn for the demonstration. I'm going to use a 20-degree bank angle, and when we do that, we're going to keep 1,000 foot per minute climb rate. As we leave 10,000 feet, we're going to increase the speed from 250 knots to 300 knots, and we're still going to keep that 1,000 foot per minute climb rate. So what we'll do is add power. As we add power, we're going to have to lower the pitch to maintain that 1,000 feet a minute, and the speed will start to increase. As we approach 300 knots, we'll reduce the power to keep 300 knots and adjust the pitch as necessary to keep that 1,000 foot per minute climb rate. As we get to 12,000 feet, we're going to reduce our pitch to maintain 12,000 feet. We're going to reduce the power to maintain 300 knots. And of course, if we reach the heading, the cardinal heading that is opposite us will roll out of the turn as necessary when that cardinal heading comes up. Then from there, we'll descend S-turns in a descent. Now we'll descend to 8,000 feet. On the descent, we're going to maintain 1,000 foot per minute. We're going to reduce the power to maintain 300 knots. And as we establish the descent, then we'll turn in the opposite direction back to the original cardinal heading. So in our case, we turned left on the first turn. On the second turn, we're going to turn right and go back to whatever original cardinal heading we were on, whether that be north, south, east, or west. We'll do it again with a 20-degree bank turn. We're going to keep 1,000 foot per minute descent rate with our pitch, and we're going to maintain 300 knots with our thrust. As we approach 10,000 feet, we're going to maintain 10,000 feet. We'll slow from 300 knots to 250 knots while maintaining 10,000 feet. Once we approach 250 knots, then we'll descend to 8,000 feet at 1,000 foot per minute. As we approach 8,000 feet, we'll increase our pitch to maintain 8,000 feet. We'll increase the power as necessary to hold 250 knots. And whenever we reach our original cardinal heading, we'll stop the turn to our original cardinal heading, and then we'll be on it with level at 8,000 feet and back to our original speed of 250 knots. And that'll complete the exercise at that point. Some variations of this, you can vary the speed. You could have more of a range of a speed if you want. You can vary the rate. Instead of 1,000 foot per minute, you could be holding 1,500 feet a minute. It's up to you. You can pick the parameters, but for this exercise, I'll use that 1,000 foot per minute and the speeds that we talked about. You can also vary the altitudes. You can make it a wider range of altitude. You could make it a smaller range of altitude. So you can play around with this as necessary, but it does, again, improve your instrument scan and your skills with pitch and power. So you can have fun with it. Again, it will improve your flying skill, and a rule of thumb is always keep small, smooth corrections when you start the maneuver and when you're in the maneuver. So let's go over the virtual simulator and we'll practice this exercise. Okay, we're in the virtual simulator. We're on runway 31 left at John F. Kennedy International Airport, and we're going to do the basic flying skills maneuvers. We're going to be taking off, heading northwest, and then turning to a heading of west after takeoff. We're going to use manual thrust. No auto throttle, no autopilot, no flight directors. You can have the flight instruments any way you choose. I choose to have them looking out the windscreen in the expanded mode. That's because my 65 eyes can see them better this way. You'll notice we have the PFD for the attitude and for the airspeed and for the altitude and the vertical rate. We've got the ND in the VOR mode for heading. We've got the full compass rose displayed. And then we've got the primary ICAS up for our engine instruments. On takeoff, we're going to be setting 90% N1. That will give us sufficient thrust for the takeoff. We'll rotate on schedule about 2.5 degrees per second. Positive rate will get the gear up. We'll rotate to a pitch attitude of around 17 degrees. 17 to 18 should be good for this mid-range weight. The weight that I have is a little less than 630,000 pounds. And we'll climb out to 1,000 feet. At 1,000 feet, we'll lower the nose to 10 degrees. And then we'll retract flaps on schedule. Once the flaps are retracted, we'll accelerate to 250. At 250 knots, we'll continue the climb at 250 knots, and we'll let the rate do whatever it's going to do. But passing 5,000 feet, we'll lower the nose to get a rate of 1,000 foot per minute. We'll reduce the power to maintain 250 knots, and we'll climb in that configuration to 8,000 feet, where we will level at 8,000 feet at 250 knots on a heading to 270, ready for the S turns. So with that, we'll release the parking brake, and we'll increase our power to 70% N1 to stabilize. And then we'll increase the power to about 90%. Doesn't have to be exact. Check.
V1. Rotate.
Okay, we're going to rotate to 17 to 18 degrees.
Positive rate of climb.
That should give us about V2 plus 10 to V2 plus 25, somewhere in there. You can see that's what it's giving us. We'll start a left turn to 270. There's 1,000 feet. We'll lower the nose to 10 degrees. And we'll accelerate for flap retraction. There's flaps 5. There's flaps 1. And there's flaps up. And once we get 250 knots, we'll increase the pitch to maintain 250 knots. And whatever climb rate we get, we get. Now once we pass 5,000 feet, we're going to decrease the pitch to hold 1,000 feet a minute, and we're going to reduce the power to hold 250 knots. So we're coming up on 5,000. We're going to start to lower the nose to get 1,000 foot per minute of pitch rate. And then we'll lower we'll reduce our power to maintain a speed of 250 knots. So there's about 1,000 feet a minute. And we need more power to hold 250. And we have to keep scanning our heading as well. See, we're drifting off the heading a little bit, so we'll turn back left to 270. Holding 1,000 feet a minute, 250 knots. We're going to 8,000 feet. You can see it's a series of small corrections to stay where you want to stay. Things are going to vary with a little bit of pitch change. It takes your eyes, keep moving your eyes, keep scanning the altitude. You see it took my eyes off the vertical rate, so it went up. You have to find that perfect spot where everything's kind of equal here, where you're not accelerating, not decelerating, you're not climbing, not descending. Let's see, I need a little bit of power because I'm decelerating again. A little less pitch. Just a little tad of power. Now when I get to 8,000 feet, I'm going to lower the nose. Not quite yet. Right about in here, I'll start to lower the nose. I'll start to squeeze off a little bit of power. And again, I get back on my heading. And we'll level off at 8,000 feet and 250 knots. That's the goal anyway. We're looking pretty good here. This is where we want to start the maneuver. 8,000 feet, 250 knots, and on a cardinal heading of west. Or any heading you desire, actually. It doesn't have to be west. See if I can quit floundering around here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to climb at 1,000 feet a minute up to 12,000 feet. Once we establish the climb, then we're going to go ahead and turn left to a heading of 090 with a 25-degree bank angle. So let's start that now. So we're going to go ahead and raise the pitch, maybe add just a tad of power. It doesn't take much pitch to get 1,000 feet a minute. And now I'm going to start a left turn to a heading of 270. When I make the left turn, or sorry, to 090. When I make the left turn, I'm going to have to add some pitch to hold that 1,000 feet a minute. And there's a little bit of loss of lift when you turn, so you have to add a little bit of back pressure to counteract that. We want about a 20-degree bank. We want 1,000 feet a minute. We want 250 knots. And we're climbing at 12,000 feet. You can see there's a lot of things to watch here. You're watching speed, altitude, vertical rate, heading, attitude. And that's the scan part of it. Now once we exit 10, we're going to accelerate to 300 knots, still keeping 1,000 foot a minute climb rate. Speed's dropping off, so I'll add just a tad of power. Again, we're going to heading 090, so I'm kind of watching that so I don't overshoot. We're coming up on 10,000 feet. Passing 10, we're going to go ahead and add some power, lower the nose, hold 1,000 feet a minute. So there's 10,000. We'll add a little bit of power. We'll decrease the pitch to hold 1,000 feet a minute. And we're going to 300 knots. And you can see if you let the pitch wander, that's what happens. It goes up to 2,000 feet a minute. There's 300 knots. We'll reduce the power to 300 knots. Whoops, we'll still keep 1,000 feet a minute. And we're going to be rolling out on a heading of 090. So here comes 090. We'll start to roll out. Again, we're trying to keep that 1,000 feet a minute as steady as we can. And there's 300 knots, 1,000 feet a minute, heading 090. Approaching 12,000 feet, we're going to lower the nose, maintain 12,000, hold 300 knots. Drifting off our heading a little bit, so we'll get back to 090. That's the first part of the S-turn exercise. I'll take off just a tad of power here. You can see the smoother and smaller you keep your corrections, the better. If you tend to be a little pitchy like I'm doing right now, you'll be all over the place. So that's why we emphasize small, smooth corrections. Okay, we're going to start 1,000 feet a minute down. We're going to reduce the power. We're going to hold 1,000 feet a minute. And once we establish that, we'll start our turn of the right. 20 degrees is good. Oops, I got 30 degrees. That's not good. So we're looking for 20 degrees, 1,000 feet a minute, 300 knots. That's just the altitude was set at 12,000, so we're leaving it. So it's alerting us to that. That was the flashing yellow around the altitude. Now what we're going to do is we approach 10,000, we're going to hold 10,000 feet. We're going to slow to 250. And then we're going to descend to 8,000 feet. I could probably do this a little better if I wasn't talking too, but I have to talk at the same time. So as we approach 10,000, we're going to maintain our altitude at 10,000. Here comes 10,000. We'll go ahead and start lifting the nose. And we'll maintain 10,000. We'll slow to 250 now. We're still watching our heading to come back to 270. And we're going to slow down to 250 knots. You do have less control feel in a desktop simulation like this, so that does make it actually a little harder, because you just don't have the feeling that you do in the, you don't have the control feel. Here comes 270. So we'll go ahead and roll out. And we'll continue to hopefully hold 10,000. And we'll continue slowing to 250. And if I don't like that rate of descent or rate of airspeed deceleration, I can always take off a little more power. So here comes 250. As soon as we get around 250, then I'll lower the nose and we'll descend at 1,000 feet a minute. That's probably close enough right there, so we'll go ahead and establish a descent of 1,000 feet a minute, and we'll hold 250 knots. And we're continuing down to 8,000 feet. Speed's increasing a little bit, so we'll take off a little bit of power. Speed's still increasing, so I'll take off just a tad more. When I decrease the power, it's in very small increments. I'm not even looking at the power when I do that. I'm just taking off just a little bit of power. Got 1,000 feet to go. And we get to 8,000 feet, we're going to maintain 8,000 feet. And we're going to lift the pitch at this time, increase the pitch a little bit. And we'll start to add some power to hold 250 knots. And that's pretty much where we end the exercise, where we're at 8,250 knots on a cardinal heading, in this case of west. And that's where we'll end it. So you can see it's a series of small corrections. You got to keep your eyes moving. It's challenging in the PC desktop to do this, because again, you don't have that control feel you do in the airplane. But you still have, everything is still relative. You're still holding pitches and powers and scanning, so the scan exercise is the same. So with that, we'll go ahead and end this session on basic flying skills. Thanks for watching. Until our next briefing, keep the blue side up. Captain Al, out.